Welcome to Cody and the Cinema. Today I'm discussing this little comic book I picked up in Duck, North Carolina, a little small shop called Martin Scorsese. This is a graphic novel with pictures and speech bubbles and thought bubbles that discusses his life, his childhood, how he got into motion pictures in the way he has, how his films were made, both successes and failures and half measures that didn't work out. And it is a really fun read. It's full of allusions and lots of references to other directors and how he met other directors. And it is just a real fascinating book. And I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. I just want to give you a general sense of it as someone who grew up on Scorsese film-wise. I mean, this is the director when I was in my 20s who really got me hooked on this cinema, especially older movies. You know, I still remember the first time I saw Taxi Driver. I was watching this film, and I'm rewatching it again now, just beautiful, you know, on a busted connection on someone else's internet. You know, it really wasn't working, and I had to get a copy of the film, and I wore the copy out, and I got another copy. Now I have this copy. And speaking of Taxi Driver, the composer who worked on Taxi Driver worked on some other films I really like Psycho, did that music for that, and my favorite Hitchcock movie, North by Northwest, and some others. And that's an example of something I didn't know before I read the graphic novel. And I've listened to a lot of different interviews from the director, and I still learned a lot of stuff in here. I mean, when you're reading this, it almost sounds like it's in his voice. You know, you can hear it. Just to give you a little general idea, it starts out with him in the middle of a dream in a vehicle that he's in Citizen Kane. And I think that's so appropriate, this giant of cinema. And it goes through, you know, him working with a particular set, a particular shoot. It has different pieces, you know, introducing his life as a kid, like this brilliant throwback to what I believe is probably 8½, right? I think that's the movie it's from. Andrei Rublev has something similar, but, and it'll have like little quotes like, "Life is a combination of magic and pasta," Federico Fellini. And it's just so reverent of cinema in general. And learning about his early life, I already knew that asthma heavily influenced why he even got into movies to begin with. Listening to him share stories about, like, just these stories about, you know, different rough neighborhoods and stuff he was in, put to pictures. I mean, it's a really great kind of genius way for you to cover a lot of ground very quickly. I think it works appropriately here. This is from someone who does not really do much with graphic novels. I'm not usually that into them, and I think it's so appropriate and works so well here. And some of the illustrations are really beautiful, like when they're talking about this Western segment. It's really pretty. Just kind of like, "I was an altar boy for 2 years. The universe of the church was magical. Priests didn't run. Nobody hit them, and they gave their lives to God. It was perfect," right? Because he knew that he could like be safer being a priest. And so you really get a lot of insight into why faith was so important to him in a way that interviews never really captured for me. This particular comic book, for some reason, really did that for me. And I love, you know, of all the different films it goes through and talks about, I do think Taxi Driver was my favorite part of the reading. But, you know, you get to know Rob De Niro and how that happened, and that's certainly really fascinating. Harvey Keitel, I really like hearing about how he got to know people like George Lucas and Spielberg and all these different directors. In, you know, this is one of my very favorite pages that I wanted to show you. So if you're unfamiliar, Paul Schrader worked with Scorsese on, you know, writing scripts and so forth, and it's always been interesting to me that he wrote Transcendental Style in film. Ozu, Bress, and Dre are three of my directors I love so much. But this particular page, just with like Paul Schrader's Transcendental Style in film and like the whiskey and the gun, it's really cool. It feels really Scorsese. You know, it feels that like gritty and just like, gosh, like Bob De Niro just winning the Oscar, even though it's not a Scorsese film. It's so steeped in film tradition. It's, you know, this part about Jodie Foster and how they made her comfortable, like how Goodfellas came to be. I learned a lot about Mean Streets, and this is one of my favorite criterions, Mean Streets. And then Raging Bull and like the studio battles. Gosh, those are fun to read. Frustrating to read. It sometimes makes you imagine what a more accepting studio system, what that might have done for Scorsese, particularly when they talk about The Age of Innocence and how he kind of felt like that was like the pictures like Senso, which is getting a copy, a nice boutique copy that I'm reminding myself I need to pick up, and how something like that, and The Leopard, how that kind of thing was on its way out. And, you know, maybe The Age of Innocence didn't click with audiences back then. Now it's a classic. It's just so much film fun, and you really have to see it. And what it's going to do, to see it, read it, what it's going to do is, like, while I was reading and I was going back through and just listening to old interviews with Scorsese, some older, some newer, and it just made me want to go through his whole filmography again. You know, it energized my soul. The cinematic part of my soul just felt like this burst of happiness and joy and bliss. And I am so glad I picked this up. And I thought, you know, I originally thought maybe I would, I didn't know if I'd make a video or not, but like, I just, again, I really want to emphasize, like, this made me more interested in movies than I already am as a YouTuber who talks about movies. And sometimes I struggle because I read so much stuff. You know, I read Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy at the beach, okay? Like, I read all this stuff that's like, it's dense, right? So this was just a little bit easier to kind of get what I needed in a, I don't want to call it an easy way, but an engaging way, sort of. And I would not recommend showing it to your kids, though. There's nudity, drugs, like lots of mental health stuff in there. It's not kid appropriate, but it is fascinating, especially if you don't know much about the director. But it will reward you, if depending on how much you know about his filmography and other films, because certain directors and different things are talked about in there. There's a great segment about how he worked with Kurosawa. You gotta, gosh, love it. So I wanted to make this video in part just to say, like, thank you to Martin Scorsese for, like, the Film Foundation and all the great films he's shown me and helped me with over the years, but also because I thought some of you might share that zeal and may not have heard of this comic, because I hadn't. And again, you definitely should check it out. It's called, I forget exactly how to pronounce his name, but Amazing Ameziane. I may not be pronouncing that right. And it just has a picture of him on the cover. And like I said, there are a few more. There's one coming out about Sergio Leone, then there's one already about Francis Ford Coppola. And I'll leave a lot of the surprises up for you. Oh gosh, I forgot it talks so much about Michael Powell. It's awesome how it incorporates Michael Powell in here. The Last Temptation of Christ. Like, this is great stuff. If you like the video today and want to give me a thumbs up, I'd appreciate that. And let me know some of your favorite Scorsese pictures in the comments. Subscribe to Cody in the Cinema.